One of the parts of the garden that I've been happiest with is the steppe. But this time of year makes me go all reflective and makes me want to think about the bits that worked and the bits that could work better. The intention here was to create a context in which I could use really low plants and low planting so that you could overlook the whole thing kind of at a glance. The thought was to not go above about knee height for the bulk of it, and then to puncture that with see-through plants, like in this case steppe gigantea, of which there are probably about a dozen through there, just hovering above the rest of the planting. And these sentinels of Italian cypress marching down both sides. Now, had I got round to clipping them, I would clip them, and I do clip them, at exactly my height, at 181 centimetres, so that they're just above my eye height, so that I can feel in this garden, not just on it, which is otherwise what it feels like. The planting intention here is to have a kind of permanent evergreen matrix of low planting, within which there's a range of bulbs that ascend and descend with the seasons. I really depend heavily on Euphorbia rigida here. That was a gift. The seedlings came from a client's garden, and I've repeated it all the way through here, whether it's in flower or just in foliage. It is the strongest and most legible shape and form in the whole space. There's another Euphorbia Copton Ash, which I've used repeatedly as well. It flowers at a different time, but that same fantastic acid yellow flowering. I used a grass in here, Festuca glauca, which I'm kind of sorry I did. Nigel Dunnett was visiting here last year, and he said he'd made that mistake earlier too in using it as a fundamental matrix plant, and it's not great for it. It just self-sows way too much. And I can see plants throughout there which I'm thinking about digging up and getting rid of completely. But one of the big surprises was this Californian poppy. I bought 2 of them in this cream color, but how they might contribute something. Turns out that they've self-sown around a bit, and they are just the most perfect thing. It's just like little hovering butterflies above the foliage. But the idea is that in amongst this really simple evergreen matrix is a whole range of bulbs to create these seasonal sparkles, this like wash of color. And the 3 key moments for that are those of the miniature iris, little dwarf bearded iris, that is all the way through the space. There are hundreds of them in a kind of navy blue. Then just before Christmas is another navy blue flush of Tritilia laxa, used to be called Brodia Queen Fabiola. It's now Tritilia laxa. And that, it has been a sensation in this garden. It has almost no foliage when it's in flower, so it needs the foliage of other things around it to kind of validate it. And then there's this other great big moment in March when the colchicums flush through here, and the whole thing is kind of stained with lilac. It's an incredible moment. And then there are other little moments, little sparkles in amongst that, like the species tulips, some of the daffodils. There's some gladiolus, species gladiolus. So there are other flushes as well, but all of the intensity and all the diversity just appears and reappears in an otherwise simple matrix. So I think some of the take-home messages from a planting like this really are to have 30% of your diversity covering 70% of the ground at least. So there's lots and lots of repetition. So at a glance, it looks quite simple. From here, just gazing back, I'm looking at what I think to be about 3 or 4 different kinds of plants. But in amongst that, when you look more closely, and as you see it through the seasons, you see loads and loads of other interest emerging, coming and going, rising and falling like tides, ebbing and flowing throughout the year.